The term metaverse blew up back in 2021, soon after Facebook, now Meta, announced the launch of Horizon Worlds, Zuckerberg's $20 billion brainchild that was supposed to pave the path to virtual reality. All the hype leading up to this launch was quickly met with a ton of confusion and criticism, and people wondering, is this really it? Though Zuckerberg's ambitions of making Meta a leader in the virtual reality industry didn't quite pan out, there's a few important things to keep in mind. Just like the internet, the metaverse cannot be owned or controlled by a single company. In fact, there's a ton of platforms that operate within the metaverse, like VRChat and Roblox, that have garnered loyal user bases long before Horizon Worlds was ever even announced. And second, the metaverse is still an evolving concept. So to say that the metaverse is dead is not entirely accurate when we haven't even scratched the surface. Today, we're going to be covering exactly what the metaverse is, how disruptive innovations become mainstream, and some barriers and potential consequences of this rapidly evolving technology. So, what even is the metaverse? The metaverse is an abstract concept that can generally be defined as an immersive digital space. So, while traditional internet exists on a flat, two-dimensional screen, the metaverse is all about immersing in the third dimension, taking our current internet to the next level. The key word here is immersive. The more you're able to blur the lines between reality and technology, the more realistic an experience becomes. Immersion ranges from augmented reality, which simply overlays digital objects to the real world, to virtual reality, where you're fully immersed in a computer simulation. Because of this, some people argue that only virtual reality is considered part of the metaverse, but it's not entirely clear. Nonetheless, the possibilities of the metaverse are endless, from being able to purchase digital real estate, to attending virtual reality concerts, to even building entire virtual towns around fast food chains, because why not? The ultimate goal is to create a boundless space where people can socialize, work, and do all the things that we do in real life, but just cooler. Neil Stephenson, renowned American author who coined the term metaverse in his 1992 science fiction novel Snow Crash, wrote, "When you live in a shithole, there's always the metaverse," which I think holds true today more than ever. Following a devastating global pandemic, constant fear around economic recession, and witnessing the heartbreaking impacts of global politics and war, there's an undeniable craving for escapism and social connection. Maybe Stevenson was right all along, and the metaverse will serve as that escape. Though it will take time for a shared virtual reality or even multiple realities to become mainstream, advancements in all types of extended reality point to a very clear shift and desire for more immersive online experiences. So now that we know what the metaverse is, let's jump into why and how disruptive technologies become mainstream, using the diffusion of innovations theory, a framework developed by professor and sociologist Everett Rogers that explores the stages in which ideas, technologies, or innovations gradually spread through society. According to Rogers, consumers can be broken down into five groups. You have innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards, all characterized by unique socioeconomic, demographic, and personality traits. Starting with innovators, this group is made up of tech enthusiasts who take pride and joy in being the first to get their hands on cutting edge technology. They embrace risks and invest early and have the disposable income to do so. Basically, huge nerds who like shiny things and have money to blow. Following innovators are the early adopters who are more willing to try new things than the average consumer, but still expect the technology to work to some extent. Early adopters are considered opinion leaders and hold a lot of influence in society. If opinion leaders are rejecting an innovation, it will likely not succeed in the mainstream market. On the flip side, if feedback is positive and early adopters are driving excitement, it signals potential success for the business, which we did not see with Horizon Worlds. After early adopters, we cross the mainstream chasm into the early and late majority, the two biggest consumer groups. The early majority rely heavily on the reviews and recommendations from early adopters and like to wait a bit until a product is proven to fully work before purchasing. The late majority is made up of skeptics who are reluctant to try new things. They're waiting until all their peers and friends have tried and recommended a new product, which at this point is not really new anymore, before trying it out for themselves. And finally, we have the laggards, who typically wait until a product or service becomes absolutely necessary before jumping on board. Laggards are the last group to adopt mainstream trends, which are usually outdated at this point, as the earlier groups have moved on to even newer innovations. Regardless of the consumer group, it's crucial for startups to collect feedback and improve the user experience throughout each stage of the curve in order to maintain and grow their customer base. It's definitely not a coincidence that Meta added legs to Horizon World avatars after seeing this was one of the biggest points of criticism from early users. The internet is a prime example of the diffusion of innovations theory in action. The share of the world's population using the internet over the last 30 years follows a similar trajectory to the consumer adoption curve. A small user base at first, before reaching mainstream status around 1995, with internet usage then exploding in the following years. Applying the diffusion of innovations theory to the metaverse, we are still very much in the early stages of the curve, with innovators and some early adopters testing out the waters, especially in the gaming industry, which is driving most of the demand for virtual reality. Aside from gaming, getting a recreational virtual world to the mainstream market is a tough process that's going to take time, education, and a lot of development. But it's not impossible, and I really do think we're going to see incremental shifts to the metaverse as better experiences become available and more opinion leaders drive demand. With a projected market size exceeding $1 trillion by 2030, significant expansion not only seems likely, but inevitable. However, there are many reasons why the average consumer is not rushing to buy a headset and jump into the metaverse. Starting with the most obvious, price. You could be looking at hundreds and even thousands of dollars for a decent VR operating system, and this only covers the cost of the device. It doesn't include things like premium apps, accessories, subscriptions, and even repairs. Since VR is a luxury product, it has to be really compelling in order for the early and late majorities to buy in. Which leads me to my next point, the overall lack of functionality. Though there are a ton of experiences you can partake in, like virtual concerts, games, and chat rooms, the metaverse remains pretty limited in its overall application. The average consumer is not likely to engage unless the things they're using the internet every day for, like streaming, social media, and shopping, is supported on VR systems or offers even better experiences than our current internet. Another barrier to metaverse adoption is the lack of accessibility. Getting the hang of new systems requires time and a level of technological proficiency that not everyone has. Also, being constantly tethered to a headset is pretty restrictive. You can't really move around or do it casually in public. Overall, it looks and feels really weird. Beyond hardware, virtual reality can be a pretty isolating experience. Numerous studies link excessive internet use to the rise of psychological disorders like anxiety, depression, and low self esteem. Being fully immersed into a virtual world for extended periods of time only further disconnects you from your real reality, which can worsen the issues we see today. Social media makes it especially easy to compare ourselves to others, whether it's watching people live these extravagant lives or seeing perfect images of influencers and celebrities. Now, imagine being in a virtual reality where you have unlimited capacity to curate your image and life. It's hard not to imagine how this could potentially distort our perception of beauty and reality outside of the digital realm. A lot of users also report experiencing depersonalization, depression, and dissociation after spending hours in virtual reality. A feeling that is often dubbed as an existential hangover, either due to the sadness of realizing that real reality is not as exciting as a virtual simulation, or the brain unable to distinguish between what is a simulation and what is real, or some combination of both. Lastly, I want to talk about ethics and privacy concerns. Dr. Moravo Zaire states in an article for NASDAQ, The metaverse opens up a range of opportunities as well as a number of risks and a variety of ethical issues and concerns. Most of the ethical concerns are issues we have been experiencing in our non digital life, such as privacy, social economic inequalities, accessibility, identity control, freedom of creative expression, etc. They are not newly emerged troubles, they merely reflect society as it is. Think about how much time you spend on your phone and where you spend this time. Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. These free apps do not necessarily come without a cost. We pay for them through our data, which companies use for various reasons, most notably advertising. With more immersive technology will come more invasive data tracking. Exactly what data will be collected and what it will be used for is still unknown, but I imagine it'll be a more extreme version of how our data is used and collected today. Instead of website cookies, companies may have access to your biometrics like your heart rate, pupil dilations, and even your breaths per minute. Imagine visiting a virtual clothing store in the metaverse and your avatar tries on a few items. If your heart rate spikes and pupils dilate when trying on a cute top, you might find yourself retargeted with hyper personalized ads featuring that exact shirt in other areas of the metaverse. Though this doesn't sound so bad, it can get a lot more serious and consequential. Take the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal, for example, where the data of over 80 million Facebook users was non consensually used for political advertising. This breach of trust, as referred to by Mark Zuckerberg himself, permanently tainted Facebook's reputation. So much so that some even speculate Facebook rebranded to Meta in efforts to dissociate itself from its shady past. Although companies like Meta and Apple have promised to prioritize user protection and privacy, extended reality is incredibly nuanced, and it's hard to ignore the risks when we don't even fully know the applications to begin with. One last thing I want to mention in terms of ethics is the digital divide, which is both a barrier and a consequence of a rapidly evolving technology. The digital divide refers to the gap between people who have access to information communication technologies, also known as ICTs, and those who do not. ICTs can range from smartphones to email to broadcast media, but internet access is often used as a leading benchmark. It's estimated that roughly 33% of the global population lacks internet access, mainly in developing countries. But this divide very much exists within developed countries as well. Take the United States, for example, where although over 90% of Americans have some level of internet access, 1 in 4 households lacks home internet entirely, with a disproportionate impact on Black, Hispanic, and lower income communities. While technological advancements can bring positive change, it's also important to acknowledge how rapid advancements in technology further widens existing digital divides. Going back to Horizon Worlds, although the launch was not a mega success and the user base has actually shrunk year over year, I don't think it's the end of Meta, and it's certainly not the end of the metaverse. My guess is Meta is going to scale back their push to virtual reality and pivot more into augmented and mixed reality through wearables or new app features. This is exactly the path that Apple is taking through the creation of the Vision Pro headset, introducing something more familiar to the average consumer while still remaining competitive and cutting edge. Although I wouldn't be surprised if Apple launched their own version of a virtual reality world somewhere down the line. And as for the metaverse, anything is possible. Meta's investment could pay off in the long term and eventually bring virtual reality to the masses. There's also a possibility that a startup, perhaps one we've never even heard of yet, develops something even better. Only time will tell what happens next, but one thing is for certain: technology will continue to evolve as it always has.